Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lynn Burke, and I am the Senior Co-op Coordinator in the Northeastern University School of Architecture. So I want to welcome all of our audience members today that could join us for a very timely discussion centered around graduating, job seeking, and career planning during uncertain times. So what happens to architects that graduate in an uncertain job market? For better or worse, most of you probably know that architecture is a field that is hit by unexpected circumstances with really some regularity. So today, I'd like to share stories from some of our alumni that graduated in the last recession and have them offer up lessons learned and job search considerations that you can apply to today's market. So you will have opportunities to ask questions during this presentation. So I will be monitoring the chat feature. So if you would like to leave questions in there for our panelists, I will get to those as soon as possible. And we'll leave time at the end as well for questions. I would also like to let you know that I'm going to provide the panelists' contact information on the last slide, should you choose to reach out to any of them after the discussion. So without further ado, let's see if I can. Is this not switching for me? Oh boy, okay. I'm telling you. All right, what's going on? There we go, sorry about that, okay. So without further ado, I would like to introduce my panelists today in alpha order. So we have Amanda Bergen, Kevin Costello, Michelle Dalhoff, Kenny Isidoro, and Siobhan Susi. So to get started, I would like to have each panelist introduce themselves and share a bit of their career journey with you. And I will begin with Amanda Bergen.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Amanda. I graduated with my bachelor's in 2007 and my master's in 2008. And I was hired by Burt Hill. I was there for about 6 months and abruptly got laid off with everyone under 25 at the time. And I was without a job for about 6 months. I lost my relationship, my apartment. I had to move. I had to figure things out. And I let everybody know that I was looking for a job. I'm sure I called Lynn at the time, as everyone did. And then I started working. A friend set me up with a local developer. So he was flipping houses in the Boston area. And I worked for him for about 2 years. It was everything, speccing materials, drawing plans in CAD, just trying to get my hands into architecture any way I could. At the same time, I was worried about my mental health, so I did become a registered yoga instructor. And I still practice today. I taught for a few years. I had my 500 hour. And then about 2 years after the recession, I reached out to Lynn again, said I was still looking, and there was an opportunity potentially at Cambridge 7. And I was at Cambridge 7 for almost 10 years, and I absolutely adore them. It's an amazing office. Hi, Mark. I saw your message. It was just a family. It felt like family to me. I worked on One Dalton, the tower in Boston, for about 6 years. And then I decided I needed to change. So 6 months ago, when the economy was still doing well, I picked up my entire life, sold my condo, and my dog and I moved down to Washington, D.C. And that's where I am now. I work for EYP as a project architect in the government sector. So totally, totally different from what I was doing before. And that's where I'm at.
Thanks, Amanda.
Yep.
Kevin, you're up.
Hey everyone, my name is Kevin. I graduated with my bachelor's in 2008 and then my master's in 2009. At the end of that, I decided to move across the country, sight unseen, to Phoenix, Arizona. I was inspired by Professor Michael LeBlanc and some of his connections out there, such as Wendell Burnett and Rick Joy and Will Bruder, and some of the great work happening in Phoenix. I arrived, and unfortunately, there was a massive unemployment at the time. I applied to close to 250 jobs, and I got 2 interviews, and I was up against people with 10 plus years of experience. Needless to say, I didn't get those. And then one of the firms that I visited had in 2008 had over 200 employees, and at that time was down to 6. And they told me not only would they not be hiring that year, but they wouldn't be hiring probably for years to come. And so I knew I had to do something different. So At that time, I had also met my girlfriend and now wife, and we started coming up with ideas of how we could create work for ourselves. And we used the savings that we had from college work and got a loan and actually got a really cheap foreclosed house and fixed it up. That house then started to get some press, and I was able to then reach out to flippers to then start doing houses for them. And from that, getting some notoriety there, we started to get custom work. And to keep it relatively short, it's now 10 years later, still running the same firm that we started back in 2010.
Thank you, Kevin. Michelle.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Dahlhoff. I went to school with Amanda, and I graduated with a bachelor's in 2007. I originally thought I was going to go into design. I had taken a co-op in a traditional sort of small residential design firm. But then for one of my co-ops, I got the opportunity to work with a company that was architects and engineers. They did a lot of repairs to existing buildings, historic preservation, facade, building envelope work. And I thought it would be a good opportunity to learn something different, learn some nuts and bolts information to bring back to my education, bring back to my career. However, I never left. It was a really good fit. It was something that I hadn't really seen during my education. And I think a lot of people have those experiences where you know that architecture is a broad and varied field, but there's just so many different ways to apply it. It can be really interesting to kind of venture out into new areas. So I never lost my job during the turn down. We're lucky enough that we work on a lot of existing buildings, so people tend to invest in their existing infrastructure and their existing assets as opposed to building new things. But things did slow down, and it was sort of disheartening at times to sit around and not have a lot to do. But over the years, I've gained a lot of new skills, taking opportunities as I could to learn about different technical inspections, different assemblies, different certifications, and things over the years that I thought was just killing time have really kind of helped grow my career. And almost 15 years later, I'm still working there.
That's great. Kenny, you are up.
Thank you, Lynn, for inviting me and my classmates to this panel. It's really exciting and privilege. It's a privilege to talk to other students from Northeastern and around the Boston area and further. So I graduated in 2007 with degrees in architecture and graphic design, and then eventually took my master's degree in architecture in 2008. After that, I continued working in Boston in the architecture field for about a year until I got laid off summer of 2009. I won't forget the feeling. It was like a punch to the gut. It's an awful experience to get laid off. It feels like someone just kind of pulled your lifeline. So after coming to grips with that new reality, I started looking for new work. At the same time, my wife and I were planning our wedding that winter, and also looking for a new house. So there was kind of a lot happening in that laid off period that I had to overcome. But I feel like I got lucky in finding a new job in Providence. It was a different role. It was in marketing, but it was for an architecture firm, and the combination of skills that I had in architecture and graphic design really lended themselves well to a marketing position. Putting together proposals and interviews. I learned a lot on the job in how to market a firm, how to write proposals, how to get new business, and how work comes into a firm. I spent 5 years doing that, and then I always knew I wanted to get back to Boston. And so I started seeking out new opportunities in Boston about 6 years ago. I was applying to marketing related positions and architecture positions. it wasn't really sure where I wanted to go next with my career. But a really unique opportunity opened up at Bergmeyer, where it was marketing related, but there was also an opportunity to build their capabilities in terms of branding and graphic design. So that's what I'm doing there now. I work in branding and graphic design, doing things like naming for residential developments, wayfinding systems and exhibitions for museums and universities, packaging and environmental graphic design for retail and restaurant clients. And I really enjoy being kind of in this in-between space between architecture and graphic design, helping clients achieve their business objectives.
Thank you, Kenny. Last but not least, Siobhan. Oh, you're muted, I think. Muted. We can't hear you, Siobhan. Can anyone hear Siobhan? No, okay.
Great.
Oh, there you are, okay. Oh, did we lose you again?
Hi.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, great.
We will figure this out.
I was a 2008 graduate. I had decided I wasn't going to go to grad school. I was kind of burnt out and I couldn't do much more student loan debt. So I had made the decision that I was going to go right into the job market. I actually tried to line up job interviews before graduating so that I could go right from graduation on Friday to working on Monday. I watched probably 8 potential interviews completely dry up. Most firms got back to me and let me know they were either going through hiring freezes, layoffs, or just didn't simply have work. I got really lucky and ended up working with an organization called Youth Build Boston, who works with at-risk inner city youth, providing really incredible opportunities in both design and in the construction world. Probably one of the coolest jobs I got to have, but just a summer gig, unfortunately. I ended up kind of stringing together a couple of temp jobs outside of the industry until the owner of the design initiative on Cape Cod actually found my resume on the BSA website and asked me if I would be willing to commute to the Cape from Boston for a 4 to 6 month stint doing some work in Kuwait with Cambridge 7 Associates. I, of course, said yes because it was a first real job in the industry and it was a pretty great opportunity. That carried me for about 2.5 years until we pretty much just ran right out of work. From there, I started what I call my pirate year. That was a year of unemployment, applying to probably over 100 jobs, everywhere from Maine to New York. I found some freelance work with an interior designer that I knew. I became a professional organizer. I did temp jobs left, right, and center, plenty of under the table work. And then I got very lucky and my resume got found on the BSA website again for another contract position with RS Means and the Gordian Group. They are the gold standard of job order contracting and construction cost data. There I got to apply some pretty decent math skills and a good understanding of building code and research ability, and did everything from construction cost data gathering and analytics to square foot cost modeling. I actually got to overhaul an entire product line of theirs. So I'm technically published that way. I spent about a year being a contractor with them before I actually sort of forced them to hire me. You can actually do that, which is fun. Stayed there for about 3 years and then started to really feel like I was missing design, and took a vacation, found a great job online that was with a company called Red Thread. They are a steel case furniture dealer. They're the biggest in New England, and they are the second largest steel case dealer in the country. I became a furniture dealer there, or dealer designer rather there, which was really, really fun. Fast-paced work, short project timelines. It's just great. But then the wind blew again, and I realized that I was sort of tired of living in Boston after 13 years. I had gone on vacation and decided that Austin was the place to be. Managed by sheer luck to find the exact same job I was doing in Boston here in Texas. And about a month later, I moved here, and I have been here now for almost 4 years. I did 3 years as a dealer designer, and then this November, I decided to leave and kind of pursue my childhood dream in a way. I got into architecture as a kid because of the little home plan catalogs that you bought at the supermarket. And today I am the director of Perch Plans, and we run a website where you can buy home plans online or work directly with us to modify those plans. And we're building relationships with, contractors and developers all the time. And so over the years, I've had the opportunity to do everything from cost data analytics, architecture, interior design, social media, business development, and sales. So it's been a wild decade plus, but never dull.
That is true for you. So thank you. That was great. So as you can see on the screen, I put some sort of lessons learned up here. As I was speaking to my panelists last night, a lot of emerging themes came up, a lot of overlap for what happened to a lot of you back then in the recession. So I guess my question is, for those of you that got laid off or were job searching for what seemed like an endless amount of time, how did you keep up your motivation? If you could speak to that, and staying connected to the architecture community during that time, which can often be tough. And I imagine some students are going, through that now, or will be going through that with the downturn. And, so how can they stay motivated, stay positive, and stay connected to the architecture community? I don't know if somebody wants to grab that one, but.
I guess I'll start. Like I mentioned in the intro, I was lucky enough to find a job fairly quickly. I was laid off for about 2 months, but my family situation is the thing that really motivated me. I was laid off in August. I had a wedding in January, and we really wanted to buy a home before then. And so the urgency to get a job, I think, was paramount. For me, there wasn't a plan B. So it was really the one thing that really drove seeking a new job. And not that I took the first opportunity that came my way. I think there were some other potential offers on the table, but they didn't seem quite right. But the marketing gig, I think, spoke to a lot of the strengths that I had. And so that's where I ended up.
Great.
So I can speak to being laid off. Like I said, it was a long 2 years, which doesn't make me look so great, but it turns out okay. When it happened, I was terrified. Like I said, I felt like I lost everything. And there were a few months where I just sat on the couch. And I think that's hard as a type A person, especially for people who graduate from architecture school. I mean, that says something about the kind of person that you are if you can devote yourself to that. So for me, it was student loans. I had a lot of debt and I had to pay it off somehow. So I had to keep pushing through. And I really wanted to get the license. And this is personal to me, not everyone feels this way, but I feel like I went to an accredited school. That was the goal. I like being goal oriented. And the only way to get that license was to be back in a firm working under a registered architect. So that was really the drive for me to stay focused on it. And eventually it worked out. Sometimes it's a few months, sometimes it's a few years, but if you want to get back in and you have that goal, it'll happen.
What kind of things did you do, Amanda, during that time to keep positive and
My yoga practice was key. I know you mentioned that a lot of people remember me as the yoga instructor. Um,
I like that story.
that was crucial for me. It still is. Being a designer and an architect and a project manager, I love those roles. But if you're not taking care of yourself, if you're not eating well, if you're not trying to exercise, you don't try to make a schedule. A lot of what people have been saying during the pandemic, you just have to hold yourself accountable. And when there's days that you don't, it's okay. You can't beat yourself up over that. I think that was a huge struggle for me. It still is today.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Kevin, would you like to speak to the entrepreneurial approach that you took?
Sure.
It's such a good story, and you can even speak to the geographic mobility as well. You could cover 2 topics right there. So,
Yeah, I think just quickly on the geographical mobility, I think the pandemic right now is hitting certain areas harder than others. And I think if you have the freedom and flexibility to look nationally, you might as well, because there are markets that are hotter than others. And in terms of sort of the entrepreneurial approach, I learned pretty early that someone is always spending money, no matter what's happening in the world. It could be the worst recession since the Great Depression, and there's still a lot of money going around. And so the key for me, at least, was trying to find where the money was going. And so I would recommend looking into, keeping abreast on what's going on economically, where's money being spent. For us at the time, it was, there was 5,000 foreclosed homes being bought every day in Phoenix, which is an outrageous number. And when you look at stuff like that and you think, okay, if I could just work on a couple of those, that's a very small percentage of the 5,000, and there are opportunities. And so I think trying not to get so blinders on towards just going and sitting at a desk and having someone hand you a job, because that might not be available, or might not even be the best option for you if you don't want to do that sort of work. And so my recommendation would be sort of keep the big picture in mind of what you want to be, sort of like what Amanda said, but take small steps towards it. Don't feel like you need to achieve everything all at once, and reward yourself for those small steps, because I think it can sort of get you down if you're not that person that you thought you might be or had this vision in your mind right away. And those negative thoughts are really based on your own unrealized expectations. And so if you can sort of set goals and then just get, one step, next step towards those goals, I think you're going to be a lot happier and better off down the road.
great, thank you. So for some of you that pivoted to sort of adjacent fields, do you feel that, students might want to start thinking about maybe looking for fields that weather recession better, or, stepping outside the box a little bit during this time?
I even
Some of
think
you sort of did that, so.
I even think for people who maybe, for whatever reason aren't finding job opportunities, that this is a great time to step back, a little time after your education, and focus on what parts of the industry interest you. What might have been some things that you saw on a macro level during school that you'd like to get into on a micro level, because school is, a lot of it, although we're very invested in projects, it's very conceptual. We like to think we get really into the nuts and bolts, but in the workforce, what you do, you could spend, years on project compared to what we had done in a couple of months. So it's a great time to step back and think, well, what really interests me? And I think being Northeastern students, you have a leg up in that you've spent a lot of time in the workforce already. You may have gotten to just get a taste for something that you hadn't seen much of in school. Maybe you're interested in, like Kenny, maybe you're interested in more graphic designs. Maybe you're interested in marketing. Maybe you're interested in, building enclosure. Maybe you're interested in more of the construction. It can go a lot of different directions. And I think stepping back and taking the time to consider what alternate career paths or career paths that may suit you and your interests and be gratifying down the long run, that you might find something that's both satisfying and potentially has more hiring opportunities right now. Or, you know, for me, working in existing buildings, that just worked out really well. It does have a certain amount of recession proof. Of course, when the economy slows down, everything slows down, but certain things are necessities. You know, maintaining buildings we're always going to have to live in buildings. They're always going to have to be safe. There's certain things like that are strong no matter what economy. So taking the time, I think, to consider different venues and just your personal goals. It's a great time for that.
Thanks, Michelle. And Siobhan, I know you mentioned that graduate school wasn't really a consideration for you, and I know that a lot of students back then actually turned to graduate school because they didn't want to go into this uncertain job market. So what about you said, yeah, I'm just going to jump in to this uncertain job market and do it?
I mean, I think, you know, it was definitely a do or die. I mean, at that point I was like 6 figures in student debt. And so adding another, I don't even remember what it was back then, like 30 grand or so to finish out was really heart attack inducing kind of. And so I just didn't even, I guess I didn't even think about it. It was just do. And I just immediately thought, okay, let's be flexible. Try to be as nimble and flexible as you can. What is it about your architecture experience and your education that can be applied to other things? And that actually came from a really great piece of advice that I'd gotten during my very first internship from a woman who was a software dealer who had gotten her degree in architecture, spent a few years out there just, you know, cranking away at construction details and all the things we do when we're junior designers because we don't have enough experience to be running a job. Mm-hmm. And she said, you know, architecture is amazing because you can do so much with that experience, but you don't have to do architecture. You can look to the fringe and find a ton of opportunities and a really great career path. And I think having that framework freed me up of feeling that pressure of like, oh, but I have to work in an office and I have to work for a firm and all of that. And it just sort of let me say, well, what really interests me? And so I knew I was interested in residential. I knew that interiors were something that was always kind of intriguing. And so I had an opportunity to do that. And each time a new opportunity presented itself, it fed something that worked for me. And I began to sort of build my own self as a brand. And that meant sort of developing myself as somebody that was a jack of all trades, so that each time the next opportunity came, I had more to feed into it because I gained all of this seemingly random experience, but I could take it and apply it to the problem that employer had. So whether it was going to Red Thread and understanding the impact of cost per square foot on furniture projects, or understanding how to work with different teams because I had worked at a very tiny firm on the Cape and coordinated with some of the big firms up in Boston and how to do that. I could do that great. And because I'd done space planning in that job, it fed that furniture job later on. Having an understanding of space at the very human scale, working in furniture, has fed what I'm doing today. And so I just kind of kept thinking about what's the next thing I can add to my belt. And I think at this point about all I have left is like lighting design, landscapes, and I think restaurant work, and then I'm done. I've won the bingo.
Did it all.
But it really is. I think I've had some experiences over the years where people sort of scrunch their noses at the fact that I had a lot of different experience because they wanted me to be sort of that single track. I've got 10 years in commercial experience, and I've had others that get excited at the idea that you are going to come in with all these different experiences and all these different ideas and not look at that problem the same way everyone else is in the office. And it's definitely given me a leg up over the years. So I think once you make the decision, just go with it. Trust yourself and don't worry about what anybody else is doing. Everybody else is going to have their own trajectory, and it's going to be okay. No matter what, you're going to be okay. If that trajectory doesn't work, try another. You won't fail. There's no fail. There's just do.
Great advice. So we do have a couple of questions that came in I want to get to. So we have one question. With law regulations, for those who went into working on their own projects independently, so maybe Kevin, without an architecture license, how were you able to circumvent bureaucracy, and was it easy to obtain permits?
Sure, great question.
Great.
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. So in different states have different rules. So in residential architecture, single family homes, most states you can work on them without a license. To get permitting, you don't need a license. And that's in, I would assume, I looked it up at one point. I think it's like 46 or 47 of the 50 states. So residential is a pretty easy way to get your foot in the door. Most people actually doing residential don't even have an architecture degree, to be honest. And that gives you a leg up immediately. In terms of, so what I did is I actually teamed up with other licensed architects to start, which helped to allow me to finish my IDP, because I had about maybe a quarter left post college to finish. And then I was able to get licensed about 2 to 3 years into my firm. So in terms of getting permits and that sort of stuff, yeah, it's not taught in school. I don't think many co-op students actually do anything with the permitting process, and so it was completely jumping into the deep end. Like I mentioned, I sort of strategically partnered with, because I was able to bring in work that other architects didn't have. I was able to learn stuff through them and their experiences to help shape the way that I do. And then once you start to go through it, you start to figure out how to get better at it and continue the growth there.
Thank you, Kevin. We have another question. Did any of you consider a non-architecture job while unemployed? Siobhan.
Oh, totally. Let's see. I did. I worked for an advertising agency doing data entry. I did filing for a charter school. I stored books and toys at a school so they could get fumigated. I mean, I did, oh my gosh, everything. I actually partnered with an interior designer, and we would offer people moving services because I was kind of an organizational nut. And I would go in and help her clients to unpack their houses in ways that were organized and sane, and learned about kitchen workflow. I was random. I've done some random stuff. But you got to pay the bills, and there's no shame in that.
Yeah, I also did a little bit of everything. Like I said, I became a yoga instructor. I got my real estate license.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yes.
Yep.
That's a good one.
That was actually crucial on One Dalton. I could really understand the sales team and how they worked in the process. So it turned out 10 years later to be a great thing. I got my bartending license.
Which is always good to fall back on.
I don't even drink. But yeah, I just, anything that anyone would hire me for, I'm a little bit different. I know the guys were saying that they waited for the right opportunity, wait for something. Me, I was just like, yeah, sure, I'll do it for a couple weeks. Let's see how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, another question came in. During these challenging days, what website do you recommend for job searching? Which is good because I just advanced the slide and we're talking about some job search considerations. So do you guys recommend any that they should be looking at on a regular basis?
I think the way that we looked for jobs is very different, even in the short, 12, 13 years, depending. But I think right now LinkedIn is a really great place for people to connect, find interesting companies, people, contacts. I would recommend to anyone to consider reaching out and maybe creating kind of almost a mentorship relationship. Maybe you can find places or employers that you're really interested in, or even just professionals that you admire who aren't hiring right now. But personally, I know that so many of them really love to help any young architects any way they can. And I'm sure they'll, take some time to have a Zoom call or have a call or meet in person when the time's right. And that mentorship could lead potentially to opportunities later on or other things. I think LinkedIn is a great place to build those relationships and kind of explore different companies and parts of the profession.
I would, and I don't know if it's different in Boston. I know Austin's a lot more informal and laid back, but I think most of the firms I know of down here use Instagram. I actually found job opportunities on Instagram. I've used LinkedIn. One thing I will recommend is that people take a look at Glassdoor. You can create a little profile, but the really nice thing is that you can read reviews from current and former employees. So you get a really good sense in an anonymous way about what that company is like. It helps you, if nothing else, to avoid some of the sort of toxic places or find out about places that are incredible. So I would absolutely look there as well.
Excellent.
I also add that I think the thing that will give you an advantage over everyone else is not only doing job searches on LinkedIn and Instagram, but also seeking other opportunities, because I think there are going to be a lot of people who are unemployed who are just looking for work, and there are so many other things you can do to find job opportunities while you are unemployed. One of them being volunteering for an organization that you're really passionate about. So when you volunteer, I think you can build connections with people that you may not have necessarily interacted with, either within your industry or outside of your industry, in your own town. I think finding something that you're really interested in and committing yourself to contributing toward that cause, I think will eventually pay dividends down the line.
I agree. So I know, Kevin, I'm going to single you out. I know we were talking last night a little bit about, how students, I think it's especially important now for them to stand out to employers and really market themselves, especially with the downturn in the economy, right? There, employers are not going after students as much as they were in the last couple of years. So how does a student right now or a recent grad really market themselves to stand out?
Sure. I think a little bit of what Kenny said is great in terms of volunteering, because the great news is that everyone that went to Northeastern has an amazing education. The bad news is it almost all looks the same on paper. And so now is the time to really sort of diversify your skill set and find what makes you particularly unique, and how that unique quality that you bring can help a firm. We get at least a dozen emails every week. They mostly look the same. They mostly talk about themselves for about 95% of the email and don't really even know anything about our firm. And so when hiring, we're looking for someone that has a unique skill set that can add value to our firm. And the school and the education is really just the baseline. And so I think the more that you can sort of figure out different skill sets that you may have or different passions that you may have, that's really going to help you stand out, create sort of a brand for yourself and allow you to market yourself as someone who adds value to a firm. And if you can add value, then they might be able to even create a position for you, even if that doesn't exist. We used to never do like 3D video fly-throughs and that kind of stuff. And someone reached out with an amazing skill set and we found a position for them because it added value to our firm. So there's ways to do different things that set yourself apart. But I would say don't just sort of stand still with what you've got with your education, because probably everyone else on the chat has a similar education to you. And so you've got to find new ways to set yourself apart.
Thanks, Kevin. We did just get another question. Good question. What skills do you think architecture firms are looking for that most grads don't have but could develop perhaps in this time?
To just follow up on that, the biggest lack that I see is any practical experience with building. Every interview I have, I ask, what are you good at? What makes you different? And most of the responses are, I'm a great designer. And usually that's not the case, because it takes a lot of experience to be able to design good buildings and get them built. And many people can't draw a typical like porch or, like the most basic thing that you could add onto a house. And so I think the more practical experience that you can get in understanding construction, at least in the residential field, is a massive, what the first person we ever hired, I hired him because they worked in a program, the University of Arizona builds a house every year in their program. And he actually, shoveled dirt and poured concrete and stuff like that. And there's a skill set that you don't have to then explain as an employer every single thing that you need to do. Most students come in and talk about how great their sort of, 3D Revit or whatever the current program is that everyone's using. But most people have that. You've got to be really special at that to set yourself apart, and some people are. But I think most firms are looking for people to produce construction documents and get work done. Design, in my business probably takes about 10% of our time. The rest is the production of that design and getting it designed, permitted, built. And so I think the more that you can focus on that 90% of what most firms need, that's going to be a skill set that will help a lot. And so I think there are a lot of volunteer programs that allow you to get some hands-on experience that maybe you're not being hired to work for a builder, but maybe you can, volunteer to build at whether it's Habitat Humanity. There's a variety of even smaller ones than that. Just to do a little work like that is huge.
Thank you.
I know a bunch of the unions up in Boston actually teach some courses. That's actually a really great way to get into if you're not going to do something like a Habitat for Humanity. I know I think it's the Woodworkers Union and the Painters and a few of the others. Talk to the trade unions because they are always willing to teach people and they will take you on. And so even if you can't find a job in architecture, you might find a job in a trade. And there is a serious shortage of labor there. So jump in and don't be afraid. It might be a couple years, but you will probably come out with a pretty good set of knowledge.
I actually, to go back, I have a lot of friends who also have similar firms. And when they hire people, they give them a test on drawing a building section as part of the interview. Like draw the wall section, the footings, the connection, all the connections and that kind of stuff. That's part of the interview to get the job. And a high majority of people graduating college can't. And so if you can do that, that's going to be very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Good advice. So we have some additional questions. So thank you very much for keep asking them. We have definitely a few more minutes to get through them. So do you have any tips for maintaining a sense of financial independence during a recession? So I guess we talked a little bit about some jobs that you can have to make money, but.
The other thing that I think is a really important thing that I know definitely wasn't talked about when I was coming out of school was know your options when it comes to paying your student loans. There are a ton of ways to reduce that cost. I know when I graduated, my student loan payment was like $1,200 or $1,500 a month. And I got in touch with them and went to a graduated repayment program for a few years. When I lost my job, the folks that serviced my federal loans actually just let me not pay them for a year. And it wasn't there was no hit. I know right now the Department of Education has a lot of breaks that they're giving people and assistance they're giving folks on that. The other thing you can do, it is a little bit of a credit hit, but you'll make it back later, is look at putting them into deferment or forbearance. I would also recommend that if you're struggling to make ends meet and you're living in the Boston area, which is one of the highest rates of cost of living in the country, I would look at moving somewhere that doesn't have that. Look to where you have friends that have already relocated or family. Look at areas that have not been hit as hard in this recession. Austin, for example, up until the pandemic, had 800 people a week moving here. We have a pretty low cost of living. It's rising all the time because everybody's moving and so people can charge more. But compared to Boston, I went from having a roommate and paying $2,400 a month for a 2-bedroom to $800 a month for a 1. So that kind of gives you a sense of the difference. You know, figure out any way that you can cut your costs. Absolutely, and be cutthroat about it. I mean, if it's a matter of credit cards going into debt repayment programs, do it. I did it. It was a huge help. They're really great. It doesn't hit your credit. In fact, it improved it. There are options, and there's tons of resources to help you. I can't recommend that enough.
Good. All good points. So we have one more question here. How can you find volunteer jobs in architecture? I know Kenny, you spoke a little bit about that, but so how can they find them?
I think just look for organizations, and if they don't have a call for volunteers, get in touch with the representative that's listed on that website. I think there are lots in the Boston area. There's the BSA, there's Design Museum, there's ULI, there are real estate organizations. I think the trades were mentioned. I think they're
USO Boston will always welcome volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
It's a Google search away.
I agree. Usually you can find those pretty easily.
Lynn, just want to point out that you're missing an M in my email.
Of course I am. We will fix that right now.
Amanda M. Bergen at Gmail.
Can I do that right now? Can we edit this? Well, I'll fix it and get it back on.
Okay.
So it's Amanda M. Bergen for anyone.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. We'll get it.
And I think even things like this can help you meet people. I mean, I'm open to having people contact me now, contact me 6 months from now. I had a young woman, I think I spoke at a Northeastern class a few years ago, and she called and said, can I just come to work with you for a day? Can I just see what it's like? And I asked the office and they said it was fine. So any opportunity you can get, grab it.
I think that's important to note.
I'll put it out there right now. Here's my little elevator sales pitch. I'm the director of Perch Plans. I sit in an office with the owner of Tim Brown Architecture, Tim Brown. We are both from Maine. We're New Englanders, and we're hiring. We're looking for somebody who knows ArchiCAD, somebody who's savvy in construction document production. You have an opportunity here to learn a lot. You can work directly with me as well as them. They do high-end custom homes. Tim is wonderful to work for. He's funny. He really respects your time and you as a person. You have the opportunity to get on job sites, to sit in with meetings, to be part of the design process at a far more intimate level, I think, than working at really big firms will give you. We're about 30 minutes outside of Austin in the Texas Hill Country. It's 300 days of sunshine. It's warm all the time. You can swim in the San Marcos River year round because it's 72 degrees. So if you like the outdoors and tacos, come on down. Seriously, email me, ask me anything you want. If you know ArchiCAD, absolutely send me your resume. We are absolutely hiring.
I might come myself.
Lynn, come down. I'll get you a margarita.
Always wanted to go to Austin. Seems like a really.
Oh, it's lovely. Come on down.
And it did have an architecture explosion not too long ago. So they were.
It's enormous. Let me put it this way. Firms down here are recruiting nationally because they cannot get enough staff. There are very few architecture programs here. You have an interior design program at Texas State, and University of Texas at Austin has one. That's it. So that's their pool predominantly. And so they cannot get enough people. I mean, I've seen specs come out from people who have like 4 seconds of experience, and I know for a fact that Northeastern grads would blow these guys out of the water. So if you are interested in moving, if you're interested in another city, I mean, I know a lot of folks at Northeastern have roots up in New England, and you can get to Boston on Southwest for like anywhere from $100 to $250. So you can see your family pretty easily. I love it. I'll never probably move back to snow again. Mm-hmm. I absolutely go travel if you can.
Yeah, good advice. Okay, any last questions? I think we ran out of the chat questions. Does anyone want to be bold enough to get on camera and ask We could do it that way too. We have a few more minutes. Anybody wants to ask a question?
While we're waiting, I'll echo what Siobhan said.
Perfect.
The South and the West are booming like crazy. Over
Oh, yeah, you bet.
200,000 people are moving here to Phoenix every year.
Mm-hmm.
Just think about that number for a second. They need places to live. They need places to work. They need places to shop. Who's going to design and detail and build those buildings? So if you have the flexibility to look elsewhere, know that there are, when I was looking at places to live after graduation, the first thing I looked at was where's the population going? Because if there are people, there's going to be places for them to live. So, or they're going to need places for them to live. So if you're flexible for that, I would say look around the country, find places that might work for you. And worst case scenario, if it doesn't work out, you can always go back.
Yep.
But keep an open mind, and honestly, it might open up some new doors and give you some new experiences that might really help you down the road.
Okay, we just got another question. So is the industry's volatility on your mind even in good times? So what makes
Absolutely.
what makes you recession proof this time around? Amanda?
Nothing will ever make you recession proof.
Yeah, I think I can speak to this. 'Cause I
Amanda
just
can speak to that.
a round of big layoffs. So when I was at Cambridge 7, I did super high-end residential, and I loved the work, but I also got scared that if that market crashes, and it wasn't really what Cambridge 7 was known for, who am I and what do I make of myself? So I jumped ship, like I said, 6 months ago, and just took off and came to DC, and now I'm doing government work, and I was only in the office for 6 months. So I definitely thought last week that I was goner. And I was told that they kept me for my personality, my motivation, the want to do good work, not necessarily my detailing skill set or my rent. I mean, no. It was a matter of you show up every day and you want to do well and you want to be a part of a team. That's why you're here, because we need that.
That's huge.
Yeah.
I would say, I think a lot of the layoffs that I know happened around here, the decisions were not made based on economics. They were, like Amanda, they were made based on going forward, who's the easiest for us to work with, who gets along the best, who is the most willing to jump on projects, get their hands dirty. So I think things like that make you a little bit more recession proof, but architecture and recession is cyclical. You'll never be 100% recession proof. One piece of advice I'll give you is that as you interview, ask firms what they've done to protect themselves, whether they've diversified the markets they work in, or they've learned how to work more in a lean fashion, or more efficiently. Ask those questions, be pointed about it, and really ask them for examples, because if they can't answer it, then that's not a place that's going to survive the next one. That's definitely got to be a thing you ask.
Really good. I know we're running out of time. We probably just have a few more minutes, but let's see. Do you have any tips about what worked for you in putting together a portfolio as an applicant, or what you would like to see as an employer reviewing applications? I know Kevin.
Sorry, Lynn, before you get started on this one, I actually have to hop off.
Okay.
I do have a project call.
Amanda, go. You're working. We have your information. We have your information up here, and it's correct now. Get a hold of Amanda. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
So anybody have an advice for putting together a portfolio quickly?
Yeah, I'd make it succinct. When you get dozens of them a week, I'm not going to look through a 20-page portfolio. And I would create work towards the kind of work that the firm does, if possible. There are a lot of competitions and that kind of stuff out there. If you're applying to a residential firm and you put all museums and schools in there, it's really hard to tell what kind of skills you have. So I'd sort of point it towards the direction of the work that you want to do and have individual portfolios for the different kind of firms you apply to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say less projects and higher quality projects is better than a lot of kind of skimming the surface. I think it's all. You also have the opportunity to be online a lot. I think people will check out your Twitter handle if people are still using Twitter. I don't know. your Instagram,
I know, I feel so
your
old.
website. I think if you have a website, that's also a really great platform for you to share your voice, to share your thoughts, write about things, and kind of build up your credibility in a certain area of expertise that you want to establish. So all of those things can kind of can enhance the portfolio that you might send to a prospective employer.
Thank you.
I would
And,
also say put your portfolio on LinkedIn.
hmm,
Put images of work you're doing on LinkedIn. Use it as your own bragging page, whether that's something that you're talking about things that are inspiring you or developing technologies that you think are really cool. But I would also put your portfolio on there. It speeds the process up for people who are hiring because they're going to go look for you and everything's right there and they don't have to go reach out. They can kind of get a feel for you before they talk to you. And that actually helps. People like to not have to talk right away.
thank you. And I want to be mindful of time. We have 1 minute, so I'm going to get this last question in. What advice do you have for entering related fields you don't have direct experience in? Like, say, landscape, public art, developing, etc.
I'd say build a relationship with someone who's in one of those fields and, bend their ear about what sort of skill set that professional is looking for, or if there's specific educational expectations, or figure out what your current architectural degree can be applied to. Because sometimes certain professions may have limitations. If you don't have a specific educational background, you may not be able to get licensed in, say, landscape design in certain states or things like that. So do your homework and find someone good to bend their ear about that.
Any of you want to speak to that before we?
I would say do it on your own.
Do it on your own. Okay.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Do it.
I mean, if photography is an interest of yours, and you want to be a photographer for an architecture firm, do your own photography and take an unpaid gig. Say, approach a local architect. Say, I'll shoot your latest project for you for free. All I ask is that I include it in my portfolio, and that way you can start to build a portfolio by helping out others.
I would also say just have some confidence when you go in there. Remember that you have value, you have skills, you have a knowledge set. Applying for jobs is intimidating. It'll drag you down, especially when all you get is rejections. I get that. It sucks, man. But be confident. Know who you are and what you're worth. And if you think you can do it and you walk in there and you're like, yeah, I can handle this, go for it. Because honestly, you're going to be selling yourself. You're selling yourself as a business and a brand. And if they smell fear, you're not going to get it. So just trust in yourself.
Yeah, I've interviewed a lot of people over the years. I've worked with a lot of recent graduates, and by far the best qualities in the vast majority are the eagerness to learn, the eagerness to contribute. Occasionally you'll encounter someone and say, oh, do you want to go to site? Are you interested in that? Not really. That's not what you want to hear. You can worry about your specific goals maybe a little bit down the line and how you want to operate in the office that you find yourself in. But at first, be willing to learn everything. What's the harm? I would definitely be, upbeat and approachable and help wherever you can. If you're getting that scenario, employers love that, colleagues love that. You just want to be part of the team. It helps a lot.
Thank you, Michelle. Well, I do need to cut this off. I want to be mindful of people's time. So that hour flew by. I wish we had another hour, but thank you so much for all of you panelists that showed up. You're wonderful. And if anybody wants to get in touch with them, the emails are now corrected and they are on the last slide that I have up right now. And you can also email me as well, and I can get you in touch with not only these alumni, but alumni perhaps in a place that you might want to go to, or that you have researched on LinkedIn, always get in touch with me. I keep that database, and I'm happy to share those names with you. So thank you so much for showing up, and be well.
Thanks,
All right.
everyone.
Thanks, Lynn.
Thanks for having us,
Thanks,
Thank you
Lynn.
so much.
Bye.